Hey,
The Starlight Talk. I'm here with Billy. And we're going to talk about autism representation. Um,
well,
Check
thank
out the
you for having me,
website,
Chloe.
autism.com, for um, my blog about living on the spectrum. I do these live streams once a week, every Wednesday at 7. Next week, I have Alexis Atala going to be on, and she's going to talk about her siblings, her foster siblings. Her parents foster a bunch of children with disabilities. That's pretty cool. Um, so this week we're talking about autism representation with Billy. So I thought
Hey,
I'd let
everybody.
Billy introduce himself a little bit.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Billy Butler. I'm a filmmaker, currently a student at Woodbury University. That's actually how Chloe and I met. We're both in film there, and we currently work on film projects together once in a while. Um, yeah, I just recently released a web series called Affinity. It's on Facebook and YouTube. So if you look up Affinity, the series, or Affinity like episode 1, you can watch the first 3 episodes all right there. You can just binge them. And so I guess we're going to talk a little bit about that. And I also did a documentary recently starring Chloe and the rest of her family and her dogs about how service dogs can help people on the spectrum. I guess that's kind of how we started working together again recently since the documentary, and then we worked on Affinity together. And yeah, so that's where we are today, I guess.
Yeah, in your series Affinity, you wrote an autistic character. Actually, you have 2 brothers in there, and you happen to have a younger brother with autism. And I thought that was really cool that you included that you're putting the representing the community in your stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely important. Yeah, that's definitely it's what the topic of conversation is here today. But yeah, it was my decision to add the character in there because it draws like parallels from my real life, and I felt like that'd be something important to include in the story to make the main character of the web series have an autistic brother that he has to help take care of because his mom is not really there that often, and their dad has never really been around. So that's kind of what like the root of the background of the main character is in the web series. So I kind of like drew upon like my real life experience to write the character in that way. Um, so yeah, and it's definitely important to have that representation in there. Definitely.
Um, yeah, it's pretty cool that a lot of minority characters are being represented more and more, and especially with the atypical characters and the autistic characters, we've come a long way since Rain Man and those first appearances, which can be pretty offensive if they were used nowadays. But
Yeah.
I really come from the opinion that all representation is pretty good representation because we're just getting it out there and just acknowledging that this community exists is a really big deal. Um, and and I think most of the representation of today is very very great. That it's not.
Yeah, we were talking about that like a little bit before we started the live stream. We're talking like about how pretty much just recently, the past like couple decades, there's been a lot more representation for people with disabilities, especially people on the spectrum and with autism. So it's like you said, it kind of I feel like it started back with like Rain Man, and then that kind of progressed into where we are now, like with like the Good Doctor, which is the show that just came out on ABC, and they're currently working on like a second season. That's like one of my favorite shows right now. Like it's just so well done and so well written, and the performance, of course, is like amazing. Freddie Highmore, I was a fan of Freddie Highmore when he was doing Bates Motel. That's actually how I first knew him, and that I really loved Bates Motel. And so then when I saw that he was doing The Good Doctor and the way that he performed in that, oh my God, it's I just think it's incredible.
But Freddie Highmore I actually know from all the way back when he did August Rush when he was a little kid. So he's a little British actor, and now he's like doing American stuff. So like I remember him as like this little British boy. So that kind of pulls me out of it a little bit because he's trying to do American, but he has an amazing accent. But I think he does a really good job. I really like the first season. I'm having a harder time with the second season. But what I really love what they did, I actually did a panel. I went to a panel of The Good Doctor at OpFest this last year, and they have so many consultants who are not only on the spectrum but are therapists and doctors, and so like they covered like all the areas that would the show talks about, so that like they diagnose people correctly and do surgery correctly and all those kind of things. And of course, like they do unrealistic things in the show that wouldn't happen in a hospital, but it's always to further that story of autism. But yeah, the first season did such a good job with so many storylines that I felt like hadn't really been touched upon before. One of my favorite ones was when the I'm blanking on his name, the head guy in the hospital who raised him, he kept telling him what to do all the time, and Sean was like, no, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm an adult. I'm doing my own thing, and I don't want to see a therapist, and I don't want to do these things, and that's my choice. And that wasn't being respected by his father figure, and so he said, well, I'm not going to do all the things that I normally would do for you unless you agree to go see a therapist. And he went, fine, then I'm not going to, we're not going to have a relationship. And Sean like stood his ground and went, nope, it doesn't matter. I feel this strongly. And he went and like slept in the basement and like, oh,
It's all like a struggle for like independence for his character, really.
yeah.
Like it's,
and I relate to that so much because I remember growing up and being told like the way you do things isn't the right way, because why can't you do it like everyone else does? And I would get so frustrated and be like, well, fine, I'm just gonna go sleep in the bathtub today, and like just do like ridiculous things in order to say that this is what I need right now, and I'm really serious about it. And so like I really related to that storyline. It was a great storyline, and it was like so heartbreaking when he goes in the morning after that to go have pancakes with him, because that's his tradition and his routine. And he goes, let's go have pancakes. Like, no, Sean, I was serious. He's like, oh, you were? Thought you were gonna back down. Like,
yeah, like it's very like literal, right? Like everything's very like non-metaphorical.
mm-hmm.
Do you feel like most of the storylines and all the characters that are on the spectrum in film and TV, do you feel like most of their story is about like the struggle to like feel like accepted and normal and like be independent, or do you think that there's kind of like that's like an underlying part of it?
I feel like actually most of the stories are about the family accepting her, or the family wants to change the character, and the character's like, I want to be me, and they kind of accept it at the end. I feel like it's more about that than actually the main character changing most of the time, which I think is pretty accurate.
So it's about the character kind of like staying course and trying to maintain their own life, and then everyone else around them accepting them.
Yeah. I think that a lot of the stories are like start out with everyone wanting to fix the autistic character, like they're broken or something, and then they learn like, oh, we just have to do things that aren't necessarily normal in order to help them, which they've been telling us all along. I feel like that is how most of the stories go. But my favorite ones really differentiate from that. Have Power Rangers here, which I think is an updated Breakfast Club with also like cheesy Power Ranger fighting scenes.
Breakfast Club with action in it.
Yeah. The original Power Rangers was like, every race and was all about teamwork, and it's super cheesy and wonderful for kids. And I grew up with it and I loved it. And one of the things I know about autism is we didn't understand gender norms, and Power Rangers, I was told, was a boys show, but I was like, I like it anyway. And I played Power Rangers with my friends, and I didn't realize that it wasn't a thing. And so, like, as I got older and I would talk to my friends, oh, remember watching Power Rangers? And the girls would be like, no, we didn't watch Power Rangers. I didn't know that.
Growing up, though.
So I was excited when the new one came out, but I thought it was just going to be like cheesy and silly. But it's actually really dark and gritty and updated.
Wow. For Power Rangers, that's different.
Not only do they have like different races, but they have a gay character and they have an autistic character. So it's really diverse.
Which character in the Power Rangers in the new one is autistic?
The Blue Ranger, Billy.
the really the blue one with my name? That's so funny.
He's played by R.J. Seiler, a black guy, and he went to Ottfest last year, which was really cool. He learned one of the other Rangers actually has an autistic sibling. The actor, he was the Pink Ranger, Kimberly, and he actually shadowed the girl's brother to figure out how to play his character.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he did a lot of research, and I think he did a really, really great job.
Out of all the different performers that have played characters with autism, which one do you think has like done the best job, and the most well researched and everything?
Ooh. I have to get out my list.
I think that Freddie Highmore, his is up there. Like
his is really great. I would say he has more a stereotypical approach, though, which works for his character.
Yeah.
But I think my favorite portrayal is JJ from Skins, which is a British show that was done in the 90s, which is about these college kids, which in the UK would be 11th and 12th grade of high school in America. So it's your last 2 years of high school, and they start off like really innocent, and as it goes, they like really grow up really fast, and things get worse and shittier in their lives, and they deal with what it's like to grow up. And in 2 of the seasons, there's a character named JJ who is on the spectrum, and he has a couple episodes that touch upon that. And there's this beautiful scene where he has sex for the first time, and he comes downstairs with the girl, and his mom's there, and there's like papers and books about autism everywhere, cluttering everything, and she's like making breakfast, and she looks up at him and goes, I don't know whether to be so excited for you or to be nervous or to be like, you're doing normal things. But also, like, should you be doing normal things like that? Because she was like so worried that he would never have a girlfriend, and then he did, and then she was like, but should I stop you? Should I not? And it was like this beautiful scene where she's like, he's just like anyone else and wants to do the same things as anyone else.
Right. There's always like that dilemma with like with parents, especially growing up with autism. I've seen my parents, go through a similar like thing. Whenever my brother is like doing like whenever he picks up a new like hobby or something new, they're always like, "Whoa, like that's awesome," And it's like, you want to be as supportive as possible, and then you always like are like, "Wait, like." yeah, like you kind of like think, you're like, wow, like that's actually a really awesome thing. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's actually funny. The more that I was thinking about like the him having sex the first time and that whole story, I was thinking about, have you seen The Graduate before?
Yeah.
Do you think that the character in The Graduate, I forgot what um, uh, I forgot what his name was, but um, do you think that there's any like implications that he's on the spectrum or no?
Hmm. I mean, he could be, but I feel like it's not a great representation of the spectrum. um,
Right.
I feel like they were more just going for like idiot guy who just like who was just trying to do the things he wanted in any way he could. Um, I don't,
But then we can kind of like, I guess there's a similar like parallel we can draw between that and we were
if
saying like Columbus
if
from Zombieland.
yeah, if that guy is on the spectrum, then I don't relate to that part of the spectrum at all. um, but maybe there's people who do, and but like yeah, Columbus from Zombieland. I remember watching that and really liking his character and relating to his character, which doesn't happen a lot. And so, especially about his rules, like I remember having just not necessarily rules, but things like I had to do at a certain time. And so,
Right, like a pattern that you strictly
yeah,
have to
like a
follow, right?
routine pattern. And I really didn't like when that was broken. So he has like, and I can see how it would go to an extreme when you're in an apocalypse and your life is in danger. How it would be like, well, every time I go into a bathroom, it's not so great. So rule number one, stay out of bathrooms, and he's not going to break that rule. Um, and stuff like that. And I can really see him being autistic, and the way he like didn't quite pick up on the cues of the girls, how like they would be
Yeah.
flirting, like he didn't really understand the jokes going on, and he made friends with this guy who was really mean, but he didn't care. And I feel like that's very like someone on the spectrum, like they can see past all of that stuff and just go, well, he's gonna help me survive, and we're gonna help each other out. Um,
Now, what about like Jesse Eisenberg playing same actor but in The Social Network? Because when he was playing Mark Zuckerberg, right? Is that who the Facebook guy is? Um, Mark Zuckerberg was actually like offended that he was portrayed in that way because he's like not like necessarily like as awkward as Jesse Eisenberg played him, and like he was actually really upset at like the way that he was portrayed in the movie, which is but I guess they made those changes for the writing's sake, or whatever their creative.
um,
Um,
I'm actually I have a theory. It's really great that you brought up Jesse Eisenberg again, because I have a theory that he's the actor himself is on the spectrum.
oh, he is.
Yeah. Well, my theory, he's not diagnosed, or if he is, he's not shared it with the public. But I've watched him in interviews, and all of his characters seem to have some subtlety of autism to them. It, my favorite interview example is he's vegan, and he was on Conan talking about Thanksgiving, and he calls it Thanksgiving. And Conan was like, "What's the difference between Thanksgiving and Thanksgiving?" And Jesse goes, "One letter." And the audience laughs, and he like looks around like he is so confused, like has no idea why everyone's laughing. Um, and so I'm like, I can so relate to that, because I take things so literally like that, where yeah, there is a one letter difference, but like, and then Conan had to rephrase his question so that Jesse could answer. Um, and, so I think the actor's actually on the spectrum, which would explain why it bleeds into all of his characters and why he would play these more awkward characters the way he does.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess that's why it's a spectrum, right? Because he might not be diagnosed, but he could still have some like tendencies or some like aspects of him that are like that. I mean, I could see that now that you like the way that you like described that interview. I should probably check that out. I haven't seen it, but um,
An interview a lot, and I think it's for that reason.
his agent's like, no, like,
But there is something, a lot of people on the spectrum are drawn to acting, and are really good at it because it's something they have to learn to do a lot of the time, how to make those facial expressions and emotions. And it's like my sister loved acting because she could go in and ask any question she wanted and be like, why does the character do this? And why did they make that face? And why? And she learned about human behavior that way. And she really used it in such a therapeutic way. And it's, um, so, so I do think that that kind of routine and playing characters and scripting and all that kind of thing is natural for the spectrum. And so they're drawn to that field. So I think there's a lot of actors out there, especially really good ones that come from the Asperger world.
do you know anyone else offhand that you think that?
There is one that did come out who's like an older British actor. I'm blanking on his name. Anthony Hopkins. He does. He stims in all of his characters. He does this like thing with his hands. Um, he stims.
And he does it for every character that he plays.
Yeah, he does a lot of stimming.
Is it always the hands thing, or is it
Yeah,
ever something different?
his hands. That guy who plays Shane from The Walking Dead, he's always going like this.
Oh yeah, he's rubbing the back of his head.
It was a character thing, but he does it in interviews. He does it in all his characters, and that's such a stim, right?
Yeah, I mean, it must be, right? That's great. I never, yeah, Shane from The Walking Dead. Yeah, I could see that now because his head was always bald and like.
He did it in The Punisher, on Netflix. What else has he been in? He was in The Accountant too. He did it in The Accountant. Yeah, so there's things like that give it. I think that's a giveaway.
I want to go back to what you said like just a second ago about how like the actors who may or may not be on the spectrum that they are able to kind of analyze behavior better. I mean, do you feel like that's like a common trait, or do you feel like that's like because I mean I can see that
we mask and script in life, facial expressions and body language and all that stuff doesn't come as naturally, and so there's sort of an acting and a push to act neurotypical, and so growing up acting from such a young age, like every day you're gonna be good at it, and if you enjoy it and if you learn from it kinesthetically and all those kind of things, and I think a lot of people would be really drawn to it, especially like getting that appreciation for playing characters, when you don't always get that appreciation for being yourself, I think is a really great thing for those on the spectrum, because I know there's a lot of judgment when you get things wrong or say things incorrectly or interpret things incorrectly, where when you're playing a character, the lines are there and it's really easy, and you're told how to react if you don't always know. And I think that portrayal gets really easy for someone on the spectrum because it's something that they do a lot in their life. And and at a younger age, it's a really great place to go, okay, well, why do humans act this way and behave this way, in those classes?
So did you feel yourself like analyzing a lot like in that way?
Yeah, I didn't like performing, but I loved reading, watching films, and watching shows because it really simplifies human behavior a lot and makes it easy to understand. And especially when I didn't have friends or anyone to connect with, I could watch these shows and connect with these characters for long periods of time, especially like long series like Harry Potter or TV shows like Power Rangers. Like these were my friends. And I got learned about them, and I loved books for that reason. I could imagine the emotion and really get behind the character and what they were thinking and why they made different choices, even if I didn't agree with them. So it's really cool now that I'm older that there's so many spectrum characters now that people can see themselves on screen. And I didn't realize how important that was until I saw Phoebe in Wonderland when I think I was in middle school or high school, like 8th or ninth grade, when I saw Phoebe in Wonderland for the first time. And I thought I had connected with these characters in the past. And then when I saw Phoebe, I was like, I've never connected to a character as much as this. And my story's never been told the way it was told through Phoebe. And I realize how important it is to see yourself on screen and to go, it's okay to be normal. It's okay for that to be how you think and behave. And that other people out there also feel that. And I have Phoebe Wonderland right here.
How do you feel like nowadays, since like representation is getting a lot better? I mean, and you've seen it obviously in your lifetime, I would assume, kind of like the acceleration of representation. So
yeah, I love where it's gone, and I'm really excited for autistic characters to be on screen and for it not to be about autism or fixing autism, for them to just like be a character in a show and you recognize them as autistic without having them say it, and it's just like, oh, there's an autistic guy and we're just friends with him and it's normal for them to be that way. Like that's what I'm super looking forward to, is to just have them on screen and like be doing the same stories as everyone else, like having one in Harry Potter or having one in Narnia or having one, just on Friends.
what I think is really great is how every main character is who's on the spectrum in a movie or TV show. They're always a savant. There's something that they are like they're like an expert level at. Like Freddie Highmore in The Good Doctor, right? He's the best surgeon around, right? And then Ben Affleck's character in The Accountant, he's an accountant. He does something that he's extremely, extremely good at and puts all of his focus and energy into it, like to the most, like 150%, And so I think that's like, and even Rain Man too. Rain Man could count cards. He could, his memorization skills were extremely good. So there's always something like that.
I disagree. I would say that those shows have become big, but I have seen many films about characters that are definitely not savants. There's the story of Luke, which is about a pretty low functioning character that wants to get a job and wants to do things that everyone does, and the family keeps him from like leaving the house and doing things on his own, and so he sneaks out and like takes the bus to do an interview and actually ends up getting a job working for someone who pushes him out of his comfort zone so that he can function on his own. And he picks up on he has echolalia and he's trying to act normal. So like he lived with his grandpa for years and years, and his grandpa was like, normal boys do a couple things. They work and they get a girlfriend and they have sex and he had this list of things, and he was like, got a job. Now I have to get a girlfriend, and now I have to have sex. And so we'd go up to someone and be like, hey, I have a job. Now do you want to be my girlfriend? And they're like, oh my God. And then we're going to have sex. And so it is more of a comedy, but he's lower functioning. And I know there are people really like that character that exists. And I'd recommend it. The story of Luke is so cute. And then there's reverse gender of that. Jane wants a boyfriend.
So does her grandma tell her to get a job and get a boyfriend?
No, she wants to get a boyfriend, but her sister sets her up on a date with someone else who's equally low functioning, but they have nothing in common except for that they're both on the spectrum. And so she's like, no, I'm going to do this on my own. And she starts going to parties and to places that are not necessarily the safest for her. And her sister's always there to protect her. She's like, I can do this on my own.
So then it's kind of like there's the two big, like, I guess, story, like, archetypes, right? There's the one where there's a savant, and then there's the other where it's like a struggle for independence or something like that, right?
Yeah. So there are those stories out there. And then there's one with kids like the Jack of the Red Heart, which is a much younger kid. It's actually about her caregiver, who's she had the stories about her caregiver who's like 18. She had just exited the foster care system, and she applies for this job and says, oh, I went to college and I got this degree, and she pretends she knows everything, but she's actually researching it while she's helping this kid. And her strange way of helping the kid actually helps her more than any other therapy that she's had. And there's like this whole drama when they find out that she's not who she said she is. But this like wonderful little kid who is nonverbal and all these things, and she learns how to do deep pressure therapy with her and how to stim with her and all these things, and it helps her to learn how to take care of her own sister who's still in the foster system. And so it's a cute story. And then what's the other one? There's Please Stand By, which is brand new, with Dakota Fanning. She plays the main character. She lives in a facility. I don't know what to call it. A group home. Yeah, a group home, because her family can't actually take care of her. And she's obsessed with Star Trek. That's her special interest. And she writes a script for Star Trek for a contest, and she ends up not being able to mail it on time because her routine got thrown off. And so she escapes her group home and goes to travel to the studio to hand it in to the studio. And then everyone's searching for her and trying to think she's lost and can't take care of herself. And she has like her notebook of all the things that she's supposed to do. So she's still following her routine while she's on the road. And she has a therapy dog with her, and that gets her into trouble because people are like, you can't have your dog eat on this bus. You can't.
That was great. There's always that, and like whenever there's a service dog, or do you ever run into problems like that with Benji?
Not so much in California. There was more in New York, which I guess it's just different cultures. But New York's not known for not being as service friendly and accommodating to the disability community.
Yeah, definitely in California, I would assume that there's a lot more, people that are more lenient.
Like dogs more here as well.
Yeah, I feel like everybody has a dog here, right?
Yeah. I'm gonna thank some people for watching. Thank you, SV and Suzanne. Hi, Aunt Suzanne. And Robin and Lori. Thank you guys for watching and your comments.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask.
Post questions up.
Benji also makes a cameo in 2 of your films now.
Yeah. My thesis film and the web series Affinity. Yeah, Benji's the service dog for um, the main character's little brother in the web series. Yeah, that was just such a coincidence because like I didn't know that you were going to bring Benji to set, and then you when he came, we were just like, hey, well, why don't we have him like walk through the scene because he was already kind of just wandering around the apartment that we were in, and we're like, hey, like if he was in the scene, it would work so much better with with the character being autistic, and it would just help really like sell like that idea, and it worked really well. Benji made his little cameo, and then he was also the DEA's dog, right? And or no, wait, was he in the office scene or was he in the house scene?
Yeah, he was in the office scene.
Yeah, so he got to be like an attack dog.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really liked just how that worked out. He was just so like obedient. He was just like, oh, I'm just gonna chill on the couch with you guys, and in the web series, it just worked out so perfectly. But yeah, thank you for letting me have Benji for that little bit of time.
Yeah. I think he enjoyed it. Oh, like Suzanne said, there's a couple representations that she wants to call out. Monk, I don't know Monk.
Oh, Monk, I've heard of it. Yeah, I haven't ever watched any episodes.
Yeah. Bones. Oh, Bones. My cousin loves Bones. Yeah, there's a character in Bones. Is her name Bones? No.
I
There's
think it was their last name,
there's a
right?
girl in that show I know who is supposedly on the spectrum who doesn't show a lot of emotion and is very analytical. Yeah, the
Is
doctor.
she the main character, like the main
Yeah,
surgeon, or I don't even know. Is Bones about like it's crime scene investigation, right? So
yeah.
they like
Um,
piece together like body remains and stuff like that, right?
yeah. Um, and Doogie Howser, yeah, Doogie Howser could be on the spectrum, that's for sure. And I want to call out like the savant thing, um, because there is like a little bit. I feel like that story of savant hasn't been explained enough. There's one thing that a lot of it misses out on, and um, what when you have the savant uh, along with the autism, yeah, it is easier to learn concepts. I think you probably have like an easier way of absorbing information, keeping information. But on top of that, to be like a doctor as young as Sean or Doogie Howser, and which is very difficult. The reason they're able to have all that amount of knowledge and be able to do their job as well as they do is they didn't have that a neurotypical childhood. They didn't have friends or go to parties and do all that. So they got, instead of being depressed about that, they got into a special interest or project and spent all their time doing that. And I think that story needs to be addressed because there is a little bit of they missed out on some things and they continue to miss out on them because they are on the spectrum and they poured themselves into a project. And for me, that was film. Like I spent all my weekends doing film, and that way I didn't think about that I wasn't at birthday parties or hanging out with people, and so I was making my films. Um, and so when I got like to college and was making films with people, they're like brand new to it, and I was like, I'm kind of bored because I've been doing it for 5 years.
So
um,
you think we should address like the part of the savant you're saying they need
yeah,
to address more is like the story behind how
yeah.
there's less
You,
social interaction and that
yeah, like
they spend more
Sean,
time.
they talked a little bit about how like his brother passed away and how that affected him, but I think they should talk a little bit about how he didn't have friends growing up, and like that's hard. It's really hard, and he missed out on skills that would make him more social and more accepting. And he didn't learn masking and he didn't learn scripting, but he learned how to be a doctor. Um, because that's what he spent his time on, and so yeah, savants may have an easier time learning the concept, but even to be a doctor like Sean, he had to spend so much time learning the things he does, and that's why he has so much information to pull from. Is I think all of his time was spent on this instead of playing games, and whether it's video games, whether it's tag, whether it's birthday parties or sports, he gave up all of that to work on being a doctor, I think it does affect him. You can see how like now he's like really wanting to have friends and to have maybe a girlfriend in some of these newer episodes, because it is a need even for those on the spectrum. It's a need for everyone.
But for as far as his character, he kind of didn't realize that until
Yeah.
now, where it's like he's already
his father figure, and he had connections and could talk to people, and now he doesn't really have that, and so he's looking for that.
Do you think that like part of all like the savant like stories, do you think that has to like I feel like a lot of them like a main kind of theme of that is the reason that they are able to get to that savant level is partially because they had all the time to spend on like studying and really like spending all your passion on it. But do you think another I feel like another element of it is they always kind of go back to that, like people on the spectrum can memorize things better or have a better way of organizing information. I feel like that's part of what they always kind of resort back to.
I think it's harder for those on the spectrum to memorize things and to learn, because especially the way our school system set up is not for a atypical person. So I had to teach myself most of my knowledge. I'm very kinesthetic. So I wanted to go to museums, and I wanted to go do things, and I wanted to make films, and that's why I got into film, because that's how I learn. And like in the sciences, even in English, it's like so much of book learning, and I'm not a book learning person. And so there are those on the spectrum, I'm sure, that are, but I think that that's a big misconception that it's easier for us. I think we just we enjoy it more, I guess. And so when you put in more time, you get more out of it. But I wouldn't say it comes easier. I think we spend more time on it again with those special interests, because when you know about a subject that much, it's so much easier to talk about it with people, and it's really safe because you know everything about it, and so you can't be wrong. And so it's more of like a safety thing and something to protect yourself with. I know for me, I talked about the books I loved and the films I loved. My sister Lillian will not talk about any subject that she doesn't know everything about. She refuses.
So it's usually all passion and focus on one specific subject. Yeah.
I
think also the memorization thing kind of varies on person to person as well.
Yeah, I think it does. And so to say it comes easier, I wouldn't say is truthful. Obviously, some people are better at memorizing than others.
Yeah, like for instance, my brother, he's obsessed with movie credits. Like he loves movie credits. When the movie, he'll wait through an entire film in the theater, and he'll be asking me when it starts to get over. He'll be like, "Hey, the credits coming?" I'll be like, "Yeah, just wait, the credits are coming. It's almost over." And he's like getting antsy and wants to leave because he's been like sitting in the theater for so long. And then finally the credits start and the movie ends, and he goes and he stands right in front of the screen, like right front row and center, and he'll just watch the entire the credits scroll up for the whole 5-10 minutes that it does, all the hundreds of thousands of names that that come up on the screen, and he'll actually memorize the pattern that the letters and the names come up on. So you have like on the one side of the screen you have like the actor and their name or like their position on set, and then you have on the other side of the screen like their name, or there's like two different kind of rows, and he'll remember like all the different patterns that come with it, and then it'll be like months later, and he'll like in our backyard we have all this sand, and he'll start like writing in the sand, and he'll pretty much write like a whole like 10 yards, like, you know, a long length of strip of the sand. And I'll be like, what movie are you writing? Because he'll come out with the patterns. He'll write like the lines in the sand in representation of the patterns of the credits. And then I'll ask, like, what movie is this? And he'll be like, oh, it's that movie that we saw like 3 weeks ago. I'll be like, wow, you remembered like the entire pattern of the credits. And then he won't stop like writing them in the sand till it's all completed and done. And it's really funny, actually. And yeah, that's like his way of, I guess, getting it out, you know, or I guess just, I don't know, for some reason he feels the need to just have it out on the sand. Once it's on the sand, he can erase it and kind of like expunge it from his mind that he had it memorized the whole time, and it was kind of like built up.
Yeah, I had a friend who pretty much only talked through quotes, and she could memorize entire movies and TV shows. And we'd just be sitting there, and it wouldn't always be relevant. And she'd just like start quoting like the whole episode of Avatar she saw, and we were just like, okay.
With Avatar: The Last
Really
Airbender,
impressive, but not at all on topic.
but will it make sense in what you guys are saying in like the dialogue, or like will it just kind of be random?
Got better at it over time, but it was very random when I first met her. We tried to include her in everything because we were like, it's just her. But like sometimes we just like would mention like a show she liked, and she just quote just so much from it, and we're like, great job.
What was your favorite show to quote, though, or was it just any one that she?
The Simpsons. She loved Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Oh, those are two good shows. Those are the two like best quotable shows. Like The Last Airbender has so many different like lessons and like teachings in it, and then like The Simpsons is just like pure like silly like comedy. Like, those are like those are the two best like quotes you can pull from, or like the shows you can quote. You know.
Now she barely scripts, but she I just remember that she would echo the whole show. We're like, you're still going. Oh my god. So yeah, everyone has different skills, and so like she can memorize a lot. I don't know how useful it is, but she can memorize a lot pretty quickly. And I think in pictures, so it's harder to pull up exactly what was said, but I can pull up different pieces of things, emotions from things.
So you're more of a visual person then.
Yeah. So memorizing on my like when I took the test for my diagnosis, my memorization was like way at the bottom. It was so bad. But I was really good at like the patterns and the other areas because I could see it. And then kinesthetic, I was like the best at, and we were able to like move around and do things.
Yeah, I feel like those are for me as well the two best ways of learning. But I guess maybe that's just through being a filmmaker, or that's just the type of mindset. I mean, we're both in film, so I mean, that's just that type of. I guess it's the type of like person or category of like artistic and creative. You know, how's speaking of which, how's any projects you have? How are all your scripts coming along?
Um,
And aren't you working on a play as well?
a musical, actually. Yeah, so the musical City of Bones, me and Dare have decided to put aside, especially because it's based on City of Bones, the book, and that material we're not sure we could ever get, copyright for. So it pretty much has a full draft, which is pretty cool for a full musical.
Oh, yeah?
But
do you have all the songs written and everything like that too?
All the what?
Do you have all the songs written and everything like that too?
The lyrics, not necessarily like all the music. But yeah, there's so many songs that we wrote for that. Um, she started actually on a musical that will have a atypical character. Originally, it was going to be autistic, but she might just have anxiety. But we're thinking that she's a nonverbal character and then is able to use music to talk. And so we'll have when the musical part would be like what she's thinking. And so we'll have like these two worlds where she like part of autism and anxiety, which is how we connected because she has anxiety, is that we both have like a huge imagination we would go into, especially as a kid, and like imaginary friends and everything. And so the character imagines all of her family and friends around her as these fantasy characters. So you go into like princesses and princes and dragons and witches and when she starts singing. And so you have like these parallel worlds.
Oh, that's really cool. So she's like got her own like fantasy in a way that she
Yeah.
lives through and helps her kind of like understand communicating, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so her music teacher is like her biggest mentor, and she's not getting along with her mom as much. And then she has I think an older sister. But yeah, Dara's pretty much taking the reins on that because I wrote most of City of Bones, and then I'm writing a version of Romeo and Juliet.
Oh yeah.
um,
What's your new twist on it?
so it's modern day. It's a comedy. So it's sort of that same feeling I did for City of Bones, but I'm doing it with Romeo and Juliet, so that in that same style, so that it can actually be performed. It's finished. So I love the opening scene. He comes back to school and he's a senior and he's trying to get Rose to go out with him like again, and she's like, no way would I ever go out with you. And then he like gets depressed and like just lays in the school hallway, and then his friends all come by and go, oh my god, it's Romeo again being dramatic. um, and then the first song they go to is in math class, and it's like math class, the most depressing time of day, and they all sing about their woes. And then at the end of the school day, they go to the party, and that's where he meets Juliet. And so I have all these like cool ideas for the characters. I'm gonna have some gay characters in it, and I'm gonna add more females to it because there's not enough. And it's gonna be really funny.
Do you find that you write, or are you interested in more comedy or drama?
Well, I need both in my life.
a good healthy balance of the two, right?
I read a lot of dark comedies, which is why I was drawn to Romeo and Juliet, because it's very dark. And so I think it can also be really funny because like teenagers think everything's the end of the world.
But are you more so interested in writing in general, as far as like filmmaking and like the entertainment world and everything?
Yeah, for the moment, I'm really enjoying writing. Eventually, I want to direct more things. I don't have the time right now, and I'm perfectly okay with that based on all the projects I'm doing. But I still
Well,
want
maybe
to get
someday, like,
stuff out there.
yeah, someday we got to do that. The script that you
Mhm.
sent me a while ago, we got to do that. I think you should direct it. I mean, if anything, you should be the one to do it. and then we can produce together or something like that.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, and I mean, it was how many pages? Like 6 pages?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty. That's doable in like a short in a short production amount of time. So like 2 days or so, But I mean, that's something to consider like later on once you're not so busy or anything.
Hmm. We got a question from Dylan, wondering what you think of the shows Atypical and The Good Doctor. So we talked about The Good Doctor a bunch.
Oh yeah, a lot. But
I
Atypical, I haven't seen actually. It's a Netflix show, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I have. I saw the first season, and I don't think I finished the second season. I had a harder time with Atypical than The Good Doctor. Not like the character himself is great. The show I feel like focuses on way too much. It like tries to like do way too many stories at once. Um, so it kind of lost me where I stopped caring about these characters. The first season, I felt like when I finished that it has a completely wrong title. It's not about being atypical. It's about figuring out romance in that realm of things. And because you meet the parents are going through a rough time, you're not sure if they're going to divorce. The older sister's figuring out if she's in love with her boyfriend, and then the main character Sam is also he wants a girlfriend and doesn't quite know how to do it. Um, so like they're all exploring that, and I felt like it wasn't really about him as a like figuring out his atypical world. I felt it was just like a kid figuring out romance, which is perfectly fine. But I just didn't like the way they addressed his autism. It felt like the story should have just been focused on the romance because I felt like those subplots that were about the world of autism weren't like they didn't do justice because it wasn't the focus of the story. And I don't. They didn't have consultants till the second season. They didn't have.
Oh really?
Yeah. They didn't really have anyone with autism working on that first season. They like there were people like parents of people with autism. There were therapists. There were like people who knew about autism, but they didn't have anyone with autism. Uh,
Right.
and I think there's a big difference between knowing about autism and having someone with autism working on it. Where I think that's the Good Doctor why I connected so much with that first season is they had consultants from doctors to those on the spectrum to therapists to like everyone because they have so many characters,
Yeah.
many stories, and they have consultants for all of that. And they were heavily involved. Where I think Atypical needed more of that, and they have more of that on in the second season. But I couldn't get into it. I know a lot of people love the show, and it's totally cool if you do. Like, it's great representation. I think it's just I don't like that the story.
I, I think it came down to just the producers at that level because like when you're on like a medical show, right? Any medical show like Grey's Anatomy or The Good Doctor is included in that category. They have consultants out the wazoo. They have like so many medical consultants, so they had that idea already to say, hey, we should also get consultants to help with the factor of autism in the show. And it makes sense that Atypical might not have done that, based on just what you're telling me now. But I haven't seen that show, so I can't really make a fair assessment on it. But like, what do you think about the performance, one compared to the other?
um, I feel like with the Good Doctor, he his character just has more range. Um, but that and I think that in Atypical Sam wasn't given the actor wasn't given a chance to show that range because of the story. So I think he did a good job with what he had, especially if he didn't have a consultant to work with. I think his character, there are people like that. I've definitely met people very much like him on the spectrum. Who
Which character?
Sam from Atypical, but
Okay.
I just feel like with what he had a much harder job with what he was given because he his story wasn't as deep, you know. With The Good Doctor, like the story itself was so good.
And also the writing is on
Yeah.
The Good Doctor is really phenomenal. Like they make his character actually have like such a funny sense of humor. It's so subtle, and everyone kind of like starts to get him at the end of the first season. They're like, oh, I kind of get when he's making a joke or when he's trying to like be. And he tried himself to like implement humor in whatever he was saying or try to be more likable in a way to the other surgeons that he was working with.
But I think both of these examples, they're way more, they're a little bit more stereotyped and have been done before, where I really recommend checking out Skins, the JJ episodes in Power Rangers. RJ Styler does such a different portrayal. There, the story of Luke has a couple people on the spectrum that are they're just so different from what we've seen. In Atypical and The Good Doctor.
I was thinking like kind of going back to my web series and the representation that we had there. Do you think that there's been any stories where the main character of like a drug like crime drama is on the spectrum that you can think of? Because I can't think of any shows that are or any movies that are like that.
I don't think so. I mean, I'm sure if you go through shows like Law and Order, that there had to have been one at some point because there's so many characters. Um, I know the show The 4400 had an autistic character at one point, which was really cool. And that's one of those shows that like has new characters every single episode. Um, and so like that was one where like everyone developed superpowers, and so there was like a autistic character that developed superpowers, and they didn't know what to do with him because they couldn't really get through to him, and he was becoming dangerous. So that was like interesting episode. That was done really well for it's an older show, so it was very forward for its time. So, so I'm sure if you go through like Law and Order and like those kind of shows that it's existed, but as far as like a main character that's throughout, I don't think so. Not one.
Do you think like hypothetically, like let's say that Affinity
A minority character that's not a white male, that has not been done a lot.
Wait, what's that?
Someone on the spectrum that's not a white male is also pretty rare.
Yeah, that's actually I was about to say. What if I made Mason in Affinity be on the spectrum and his brother not on the spectrum? What if I switched the two? Would that be like a completely? Do you think that that would be a good like idea if, like, for instance, the show got picked up or something like that, right? I just want to see what you think about that.
I think that would be really cool.
So I've been thinking about that. I mean, obviously the web series is over, and I mean for now at least. But I've been sending it out to different people, seeing who wants to maybe take a look at it and option it. So I was kind of just considering doing that with like the final idea, maybe.
Yeah, I think it would be really cool to see that, or addressing some kind of atypical spectrum, whether it's ADD or dyslexia or bipolar, like something, because a lot of portrayals, like the biggest example is like split personality. It's shown like so negative, where like there's a lot of like really cool ways to portray characters in the atypical realm that haven't been done that as well. So
So it might be a good idea.
yeah, I think it would be cool just to see.
Add like a little twist to it in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I don't know. I'm just kind of randomly kind of
And
spouting
it
out
would be
ideas.
really fun, like that might add like a little bit of comedy in those scary scenes where like they're trying to tell him things and he's not understanding. Like what?
Actually, yeah, that would work. That actually worked really well to add a little bit of like flair in it in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, hey, that's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to try for that if we take the show anywhere, or do anything with it.
All right. I'm going to start wrapping up. Thank you, Billy, for joining.
Oh yeah, of course. It was a great. It was. I love this show, and thank you for having me on it. I really appreciate it. It was a blast.
And guys, please come back next week. Alex Tala's going to be on, and we're going to talk about. She has a really cool story about her life with foster siblings who all have disabilities. She was born deaf and um, has learned sign language and multiple languages, so she was a little bit behind in verbally speaking. She just has some really cool stories, so I hope you come back next week, Wednesday at 7. Check out our website. We have a support group tomorrow at 7 o'clock for folks on the spectrum. We also have my blog on the website where I write about living with autism. Check out Life Math. I just was in my Life Math meeting today. I go once a week for that. I love it. All right. So thank you, Billy, for being on.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thank you, Chloe, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Bye, guys. Stay colorful.